My name's Andrew Wooten. I originally grew up in Russia and Ukraine, but went to college in Singapore at a program called Yale and US College, which was a program organized by Yale University and the National University of Singapore. I studied math and computer science and economics at Yale and US. I'm currently studying in the GSB, so I'm an MBA 2. I applied to Stanford through deferred admission, or the 2+2 program, and I've been a student here for a little bit over a year. What was it like when you got in? What emotions arose for you? So this is a funny story. So Stanford Business School is famous for the fact that every accepted student gets a call, either from their interviewer or from the dean of admissions. And I was expecting a call. I think I looked up on Poets and Quants roughly when that call would come in. And then, that day went by and the call didn't come in. So ultimately, when I was refreshing the application portal a couple days later, I thought I was just doing due diligence. I was pretty sure that I'd gotten rejected. But I refreshed the portal and it says, "You've been accepted." And I was so excited. I was there with my friends. It was probably one of the happiest moments of my 4 years in college. I was extremely excited about the possibility of coming here to Stanford and how that could impact both my life, but also enable me to have more impact throughout my career. It turns out I hadn't paid the phone bill that week, which is why I didn't get the call. I'm pretty sure the call was made on the other hand, but it didn't go through. What were some challenges you experienced during your application process? There's really just a couple big important steps of the MBA admission process. The first is you have to take the GMAT or the GRE. I think I looked at a couple practice questions and realized that I was more comfortable with the GMAT. The second is you have to write a personal statement and answer a couple semi-essay questions throughout the application. And the third is you have to source your recommendations and think about your kind of resume and extracurricular experience. So I was really thinking about those different steps, and I decided to get the GMAT out of the way first because I kind of enjoy taking tests, and I just thought it would be simple to quickly go through a book of test prep and take the test. The second step was working on kind of refining my extracurriculars, asking for recommendations. I got one recommendation from my senior thesis advisor who coached me on my computer science undergraduate thesis, and my second recommendation from my manager at work. And then as I was thinking about the essay, Stanford has this really famous essay prompt, which is what matters to you most and why. Had I had to answer that question on the spot back in my senior year of undergrad, I probably wouldn't have really known what to say. But I started a soul searching process, and some really good advice I got was think about what evokes the strongest emotions, whether maybe what social issue or injustice are you most upset about, or what kind of technologies or problems get you really excited and you could talk for hours about. I think that's kind of how you should define the scope of what matters most to you. It's going to live somewhere in that. So maybe what gets you really excited is conversations about future technologies, but dig deeper. Like, why do you care about future technologies? Is it something about optimism for the future, or is it about the inventions that have impacted your life? So I think as you write that what matters most to you and why essay, try to understand what gets you excited, whether in a positive way or a negative way, and then just dig deeper and try to understand what is the core of what matters to you and how does it connect to those feelings of excitement. And that was my process for writing my essay. What have you learned about yourself through the application and preparation process for a deferred MBA program? I guess the biggest insight for me through that application process was just reflecting on that essay question, what matters most to you and why. I wrote my essay, it would have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, but I remember that the general theme of what mattered to me most at that time was kind of the pursuit of critical thinking and reason, and kind of essentially the factors that go into that, like the willingness to be challenged and confronted with new ideas, freedom of speech. And I talked about those concepts in my essay and how they influenced my life and perspective growing up in Russia and Ukraine and then going to a liberal arts school. So I'd never really reflected on that, but figuring out what mattered most to me and why, and then connecting that to what I was doing at work actually gave me a lot more meaning and fulfillment in what I was doing professionally, but then also it gave me kind of more direction on how I wanted my career and personal life to evolve. Why do you think you got in? What differentiated you as a candidate? You don't want to overassume, because the dean of admissions on the first day of school said something to the effect of the reason you think you got in may not be the reason you were accepted. So I guess at the end of the day, I'll never really know for sure, but I think some things that helped me stand out as an undergraduate student was that I'd done a lot of entrepreneurship, and I was actually working as a manager at Crimson while going to school, and I think that kind of helped me stand out and be unique in that I had some pretty pretty cool professional accomplishments while in undergrad. I think probably what was more important was just the fact that I did some soul searching and really understood, what makes me different and what do I really care about and how does that connect and weave through the narrative of my life. And I think that's what admissions offices really want to hear. They care about what you've accomplished to date, but I think they're really trying to figure out what potential you can unlock by coming to an institution like Stanford. I think it's really important to just understand what it is you want to do and to dream big and to demonstrate that you're coming to learn and to develop into who you can be and not necessarily and aren't content with just who you are in that moment. I think that why I got in was a combination of kind of what I'd achieved and accomplished to date, but more so kind of my forward-looking aspirations for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to impact the world in the future. Are there any resources or strategies that you found particularly helpful during your application process? So I'm really fortunate in that my boss at work and mentor, Jamie, who's also an advisor at Crimson, he had gone to Stanford Business School just a couple years earlier. So he could really help me understand, what does it mean to go to Stanford Business School and how to think about, what candidates are they looking for and what to highlight and my interest and personality and background in order to, really build a strong application. And Jamie was really helpful. He both helped me think about the strategy and narrative that I wanted to put into my application, like what story I was telling, but also really helping me ensure that my essay was well written and tight. And we went through lots of drafts where, I would write a draft and he'd give me feedback on how different paragraphs or words are coming across and landing. And I made, hundreds and hundreds of revisions until I got to my final essay, which looked like 100 times better than my first draft. So I think having someone who knows how to write a business school essay and knows how to tell that story, and preferably, spend some time getting to know you, using that time with them to really sharpen your narrative and story and essay, I think is a really good use of time and a really important resource to have when you're applying to business school. What did you do for your gap years before business school? So I took 3 years off between undergrad and business school. I initially planned to take 2 years off, but then COVID happened and business schools were still kind of partially remote. And I thought I'd rather take an extra year off and really get the full business school experience. During those 3 years, I actually worked at Crimson in various roles, first as SVP Revenue, then Chief Revenue Officer, and got to focus on building our global team and kind of building an infrastructure of sales and marketing that would allow us to be accessible and reachable in all the different parts of the world, which is a really cool role. Crimson's an incredible organization with an awesome and enthusiastic team. I had a great time doing that, and fortunately I got to continue to work with that team and in that role as I started business school. Were there any unexpected challenges you faced during the application process, and how did you overcome them? I think something to keep in mind is that the recommendations are a pretty important part of the application. So just start building those relationships early on so that when you're asking someone for a recommendation, they tell the story of who you are instead of just kind of writing a generic template recommendation. So that's the one where I think you need to have the most lead time. The GMAT you can prepare for, if you really work on it for a couple weeks, maybe a month, but the process of getting great recommendations comes from having a strong relationship that's been built over multiple months or years. So I would really, if applying to business school is something that's a little bit farther out, is probably the first one you want to really be thinking about, as well as just planning your resume and your extracurricular activities, your grades. Those obviously are built over lots of time, but specifically to the application, the recommendations need to be great. So I would get to work on those as soon as you decide you want to apply. What sort of networking experiences should they look to engage in? In terms of networking for business school, I don't necessarily think that knowing someone at the business school is going to be helpful, but I think what's really important is understanding why you're applying to business school and what makes that business school unique. And the best way you can figure that out is to speak to recent graduates. Ask them about the classes they took, ask them about the extracurriculars that they spent time on, ask them about their favorite traditions. This will both help you understand, is this the place for me? Am I gonna have, a special, impactful 2 years in that environment? But it'll also give you those kind of nuggets that you can reference in your Why Stanford essay. So I would say make friends and get to know people who are in the business school, but not because they're gonna send a personal note to the dean, but because you'll be better equipped to both understand whether you're a good fit and you'll be better equipped to communicate to the school you're applying to that you're the right fit. Apart from that, I'd say networking is really important from the perspective of, building your career, but also getting recommendations for your application. So, be friendly, show up as your best self so that you can get those strong recommendations, but just more generally so that you do well in whatever you're doing.